The Gospel of John, the first chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi," which is teacher, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." The Gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Tonight we heard at the beginning Samuel's calling and prophetic activity in 1 Samuel, about this boy Samuel ministering to the Lord under Eli. And I hope you took note when Evelyn read, "The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread." Eli, well, his eyesight had grown dim. And it seems like it had grown dim for so many people, that is, so many of God's people. Their faith had grown dim. Not just their eyesight and their hearing, as appears in this story, because Samuel hears, but Eli can't seem to hear a thing. But as far as them listening to God and living according to God, that seems rather rare in those days. One could say that in any days of the Lord. It's one thing to hear the word of the Lord, but to have that kind of vision, to be able to speak the word of the Lord, to go and do the Lord's work out in the world. How many Samuels are there in this day and age? For the Lord kept calling, "Samuel, Samuel." And you notice what he said. He didn't say, "Lord, don't bother me. I can't really get involved right now to help your ministry in the church. I certainly can't serve on any committees or teams or commissions. I could never serve in a really big leader capacity. And I'm just not really sure about my talents, so really don't bother me about having to give my talents. And I really don't have that much time to even be at church because, Lord, my life is very busy." No. Instead, Samuel responded, much like we'll hear in our song tonight, "Here I am. Here I am, Lord. Here I am." Eli didn't seem to hear it. Note who hears. This boy, this young person. Samuel's the one who hears the Lord and responds immediately, "Here I am, Lord." In other words, "I'm here for you, Lord." Eli couldn't seem to hear. So this keeps going on, time after time after time. "Here I am, for you called me." Finally, Eli perceives the Lord was calling this young boy, this youth. And then, "You shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" And indeed, that's what Samuel said. What do we say to God? God is definitely calling. We can hear it in the gospel tonight, but we certainly hear it in this Old Testament. "Speak, for your servant is listening." Is that the response of God's people, by and large? Think about this God we're supposed to respond to. I cannot think why people would not come to the temple of the Lord, so to speak. In other words, into our congregations, not just here, but every weekend. Why they really wouldn't be close to bursting every weekend. Why? Because did you hear what we heard from the psalm tonight? We heard it last week as well. And of course, Dave did some of his preaching about it. For you yourself, O God, created my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. What an awesome God. You know, there's that contemporary song, you know, our God is an awesome God. What an awesome God. This is a God that's more important than anything else in the world. Why? Because this is the God who created our inmost parts, knit us together in our mother's womb. This is the God of Samuel, who calls out. And notice who responds, the young ones. And think about that for a minute. We go from the womb to the young ones. When our youth respond, and they do, to God's word, how often do we listen to them? I mean, apart from maybe parading them up in front every once in a while and having them talk about their mission trips or other things, maybe once in a while there actually are readers. But do we listen to our youth who have listened to God? In Eli's time, the people of God were not so faithful. There were some, but so often, as happens to too many of us as we tend to get like me, get a little older, I think we just get so comfortable. Maybe it's not so much that we're not listening, but maybe it's more that we've heard this so many times. I mean, we've heard the word of the Lord decade after decade after decade. Maybe we just don't have that excitement that the youth have, like Samuel, who becomes one of the great leaders of God's people. Or perhaps, just for us, since we've heard it so many times, we begin to think, but I've been around a long time. The church and the world, we've had changes. We had that 500 years ago with Luther, and, we're here now. But really, has the word of the Lord really reached out the way we anticipated and really hoped for? It's kind of easy at that point to say, let's let somebody else do the work of the Lord. But we're all in it together. And so sometimes maybe we have to be like Eli and listen to that young voice. And listen to the young voice of Jesus. Remember, Jesus wasn't that old. He wasn't in his 80s or 90s speaking these words of wisdom. He was a young guy in his 30s. And the story begins tonight this way. The next day, Te Eburian. In other words, it links this story with the two preceding ones. I want to invite you to go back into John. I mean, it's just the first chapter after all. Go back there and read those other stories. See how important it is, because it says at this point, early in the ministry, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. Kailage aton ho Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth goes back to his backyard, his home area. It's a beautiful area when you take the tour buses through and you go along the road. It's this beautiful green, lush area. And you go in and there are these beautiful hillsides. And then you get to Nazareth. And this is where we now find, in Galilee, we find Philip, who said to him, "Follow me." Jesus of Nazareth says to Philip, "Follow me." Well, it's amazing. Because when Philip shares the story, he says, "Nathanael, I have found the one. I found Jesus." In other words, I I found the Messiah. This is the greatest news in all the world. And what is the response of the faithful Nathanael? Was it, this is the greatest news I've ever heard. Let's get together. Let's go out. Let's spread this in our community, in the whole world. Nathanael says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? If, like me, you grew up in Austin, it would be like saying, can anything good come out of Albert Lee? By the way, my mom went to school at least in Albert Lee. On the farm, but she went to school in Albert Lee. That's the kind of thing we would say, and they'd say the same thing back to us. Can anything good come out of Austin? Well, plug in the town you want to think of. Or maybe it's the neighborhood. Maybe it's Dogtown. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's the trailer parks that we see. You know, where it is, can anything good come out of those places? Because after all, you know, Jesus' hometown, Providence, it makes sense that Nathanael was so skeptical. Because here Philip is making this contention that, you know, Moses and the prophets, this is the one they were writing about, this Jesus of Nazareth. It's inconceivable. Because from that Old Testament, and all these words, and all that we've been waiting, from the Psalms, from Samuel, all these years, these millennia, and this is who we get, somebody from Nazareth, this village of really no consequence. I mean, nobody that you know comes from Nazareth. The Gospel of John talks about the identity of Jesus. And it's important to think about how we feel about certain people from certain areas. Because if we are to be Christ for the world, if we respond to come and see with Jesus' words to follow me, if we're going to be Christ for the world, then we have to ask ourselves, who have we come to see? Who is this Jesus that we not only take into our hearts, but we're going to take out when we leave tonight? You notice this is pretty easy. This is not like in some of the other Gospels when Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me. Jesus simply says, follow me. And Philip responds. He leaves everything. He leaves everything behind. In other words, anything that might complicate his life to serve Jesus. And he follows. Takes some convincing for Nathanael. Jesus literally has to say, here's one in whom there is no deceit. Doulos. There's no cunning, or you can translate it as guile or treachery or trickery. So unlike Jacob, who is, the name for Israel, right? Jacob, who deceived his brother Esau, or others who continue to mistake Jesus' kingdom, who he is, or his power, and all of those things that we read in Genesis, we read in the Gospel of John numerous times. According to Jesus, this Nathanael, once they come face to face, is one with no deceit. He's not even upset about Nathanael being all skeptical. Because Jesus isn't upset about us being skeptical about where Jesus is in our lives, in our hearts, or in what we do. Jesus believes in us. Now, is this the Jesus that we believe in? Come and see and follow me. Who are we going to follow? Will it be the God back in Eli's time, when the word of the Lord was rare and they were just following traditions and following by rote, when the vision of the gospel, so to speak, was not widespread? In other words, God's love, God's grace, God's mercy was not widespread? Or will it be like Samuel? Will we recapture the God of the Psalms, the one who knits us in the womb? Will we be like Samuel and say, "Here I am, Lord. It is I, Lord"? Will we be like Philip, when Jesus says, "Follow me," and we follow? Or will we be like Nathanael? First of all, maybe say, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And then when we're confronted with the living Jesus, to say, "Teacher, you are the Son. You are the King of Israel. You are," in other words, the Messiah. Or we go back to how things usually are. We can't be bothered. We gotta live our lives. We really can't be like Samuel or Philip or even Nathanael. We can't really get so involved in the workings of God's church because, well, let somebody else do that. Come and see the one who says, "Follow me." Amen. We sing, "Here I am, Lord."